Up next, we have Matthew Cimone. So Matthew is a science communicator at the MacMillan Space Centre here in Vancouver and runs Esthers Echo, an organization which supports women's education in Sierra Leone by participating with Sierra Leone's local community leader, Esther Kanu, founder of the Women in Action Development Project. And his talk is called Jewel of the Cosmos, Diamonds in Space, Diamonds of Sierra Leone. So, Matthew.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining in. Just to start off with, I've been having some real problems with my internet connection today. So if I'm dropping in and out, please let me know. I've reset my router, so I'm hoping that kind of clarifies some of these issues. I'm going to get our presentation started here and get the screen sharing going. So. Okay. Okay, is that up so we can see it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this woman here is named Esther Kanu. I met Esther when I was working abroad in Sierra Leone, and she totally changed my life. And this presentation is really about her, the work she does, and how I met her. But it's also a little bit about how I tried to reconcile two very distinct worlds that had kind of been pulling me in two very different directions when I realized they weren't maybe actually so different after all. One of them was my work abroad in Africa, specifically in Sierra Leone. I studied international development at the University of Toronto, but I also had this interest in space. And I had that interest in space right from childhood. And at some point, I needed to find a way to bring these two worlds together because I started feeling like they were pulling me apart in two different directions. But I came to realize that they actually are one and the same. And I think I'm trying to share this experience because right now we're seeing some serious stuff going down in the world between a virus that's wiped out a lot of lives, the economy, has caused damage to the way our fabric in our society works. But those fault lines haven't fallen evenly among everybody, and certainly there's been a racial factor to there as well. And I think certainly that has helped to catalyze a lot of the protests and riots that are going on in the United States and around the world right now, trying to show solidarity with people who have been impacted by COVID, but also have been facing systematic and institutionalized racism for a long time. And so I was trying to think, with our work through astronomy, is there a way that we can meaningfully engage with everything that's going on right now? And I'm not saying I have the answer, because I think there's going to be a diversity of ways that we engage with the issues that are going on in the world right now. But I wanted to share a little bit about my perspective and how I think through space and through astronomy, we actually have a perspective that's really powerful to try to engage with this dialogue and what's going on in the world. So I'll start off with me. I was born in Thunder Bay, Ontario, and I always wanted to be an astronaut. And the experience from that, the inspiration for that for me came originally from my grandfather. So this is he and I on a dock in northwestern Ontario at Chebanwan Lake. And he had a cottage up there, and the skies were brilliant. I'm in the right on the photo, if you can't tell. And that little boat onto the right there is called an Illumicraft, and we would go out on it and sail off into the lake. And but the most exciting part of all of that was watching the sunset, and then of course having the night sky come out. The skies out there were brilliant outside of the lights of the city. And there's he and I much later in life. That's still me on the right in this picture, but now I'm taller than he is now. My family joked that for a long time, my grandfather was the tallest person in the family, but I have since superseded him. But for much of our life growing up at that cottage, we'd head out there for summers and we'd look through this. And it was my grandfather's 60 millimeter telescope. And through that, I saw, the cloud bands around Jupiter for the first time, the crescent shape of Venus for the first time. And that was my introduction to the night sky and to astronomy. And the night spent on that dock, on that cottage with him, shaped my whole life. I think it's a big part of why I do what I do now, working at the planetarium and talking to people about space. But there was one moment in particular that really stands out for me. We were looking through the telescope, but one day he turned around and he pointed to a row of trees that are behind the cottage. And this is actually that row of trees that you can see here in this picture. And he tried to make out for me a tiny, tiny faint blob in the sky. And this is that blob that I captured in a photograph. And it's actually the Andromeda Galaxy, the largest object that a human being can actually see with the naked eye. And it was just hanging there over top of the cottage. And he emphasized that this is not a cloud, it's actually the light of billions and billions of stars. And I was completely transfixed by that. I think it's the earliest moment of wonder that I have in my life. And it turned me into an explorer. There's one legacy that my grandfather left with me, is wanting to explore, be open to the world, be open to people, to nature, like just soak up what I could find around me. The other big inspiration in my life was Star Trek. I thought this was like an appropriate quote for right now. Captain Picard is definitely still relevant. And so between Star Trek and my grandfather, I wanted to become an astronaut. Now, of course, this is not me as an astronaut. This is just me stuck on Chris Hadfield's head. But he was my role model into what an astronaut would look like, what they would do, how they would also go about becoming an astronaut. So Chris Hadfield's route was a pilot. He started off the Royal Military College. He was a fighter pilot and also an engineer. And I was like, okay, so that's the route. That's how I'm going to go about doing this. Something else that Chris did as an astronaut that I thought was really important is he also didn't just, as an astronaut, look out into the cosmos, but he spent a lot of time looking down at the Earth and commenting on that. And in fact, I remember one of his early interviews, he said, like, while he's orbiting the Earth, astronauts would take the time to consider things like the thickness of the Earth's atmosphere, commenting on the fragility of the planet. And a lot of people would say, or a lot of astronauts had said, when they looked at the planet's atmosphere, it kind of looks like the skin of an orange. But he said, actually, it looks more like the skin of an onion. And it gives an indication of just like how frail our planet really is. And I thought that's cool, because if I become an astronaut, then maybe I also have a platform to comment on some of these issues. And it was another reason why I wanted to go up there into the cosmos. But unfortunately, that didn't work out for two reasons. Number one, I have terrible eyesight. And back then, I don't know if this has changed now. I've heard rumors that maybe it did. But to become a combat air pilot, like Chris Hadfield, you'd have to have natural 20/20 vision. And I did not have that. And secondly, it turns out that while I really love science, I'm actually really bad at doing science. I was terrible at math. I really struggled with it through school. So it looked like that wasn't going to happen. And there was like a key moment where the nail was put in the coffin of that dream. I met this guy named Admiral Jarvis. He was a Royal Military College. Actually, he was an admiral in the Air Force, but he was a Royal Military College representative and had come out for like that high school university day where people from university would come to your high school and they would talk to you about like joining different programs. And RMC was there. And I remember I was so excited to go see this guy, and I'd worked up all the nerves, and I'd come down the hallway and I went to go find him in my high school. And I was like, Admiral Jarvis, I want to become a pilot and I want to become an astronaut like my hero, Chris Hadfield. And he said, well, I remember looking at me and he's like, well, son, what about your eyesight? And I was like, no problem. I can get laser surgery in my eyes. And he was like, no, I'm sorry. You've like already washed out of the program. And right at that moment, this guy like killed my dreams in this hallway outside of my class. Look at him smiling away there as my dreams die. Actually, in all fairness to this person, I actually don't know who they are. I couldn't find an Admiral Jarvis photo, so this guy's a stand-in. If anyone knows who this person actually is, I apologize to them. Okay, so where did I end up? And it ended up in Sierra Leone. Now, if this seems like a big jump in the story, that makes sense. It was a big jump to me too. I never thought, as like a nerdy Star Trek fan growing up in Northwestern Ontario, that I'd ever find myself in West Africa. But the logic to me, after wrestling with this for a little while, came down to this, as simple as this. I was like, if I can't explore up, then maybe I can explore out. And if I thought in my head, growing up in a small town in Ontario, is like one of the places that would be farthest away from me to ever travel would be to Africa. And so when I joined the International Development Studies program at the University of Toronto, it had a travel component, and there were a couple countries that you could select to work in. And I found myself in Sierra Leone. And to be honest, I didn't really know a lot about the country until I went there. In fact, if I was honest, when they selected the country location, I don't think I'd even ever heard of it before. Now I know a lot more about the country. If people haven't heard about the country, it's pretty tiny, small country on the west shore of Africa. It was also one of the major ports for the transatlantic slave trade. It's one of the reasons when that the city is called Freetown, the capital city in Sierra Leone, because it was given that name after the abolition of slavery from that region of the world. It's also very, very rich in diamonds. And this is actually part of the really difficult history of this country, because from the early 1990s on to like the early 2000s, there was a civil war that like broke this country apart. And that war was catalyzed by the ubiquity of diamonds in the nation. So those diamonds were taken, they were smuggled out of the country, and those smuggled diamonds were used to fuel a conflict in the country. They would be smuggled typically through Liberia. So during the wars, during the years of the Civil War in Sierra Leone, Liberia was producing 3 to 4 times the number of diamonds that it could actually really be capable of producing. And so they were laundered essentially by traveling through Liberia, so they wouldn't be labeled as conflict diamonds. And then what happened is unwittingly, they ended up on the rings and, on the fingers and wrists and necks and ears of people all over the world, not realizing that their purchase was actually fueling a conflict in another part of the world. The diamond trade is very sketchy, something to consider before you actually end up buying one of these things. How does a diamond form? Well, diamonds are basically just compressed carbon. And the reason why they crystallize is that if down within the mantle of the earth, where it's very hot and under tremendous pressure, and over the course of like sometimes up to 3 billion years, it might take to make a diamond. And after volcanic activity makes something called a kimberlite pipe, and the pressures and temperatures will eventually raise the diamonds up to the surface where they come out. They can be mined, or even will sometimes come out right on the surface, very shallow. Now, Sierra Leone itself is actually a product of volcanic activity. So I've got some photos here when I was there. First of all, Sierra Leone is a gorgeous, gorgeous country. It's just beautiful. It's these white, sandy beaches and connecting with these green rolling mountains and rainforest. And it's just astonishingly gorgeous. And then the thunderstorms, just these incredible thunderstorms. That's why it's called Sierra Leone. The idea is that it's roaring mountains. It was like the sky was on fire. It's just flash after flash after flash of lightning. But it's actually very easy to find volcanic rock all over the place. So here's an example. I was standing on a beach, and this is volcanic rock that's here at the edge of this beach. So it's the outcropping of Sierra Leone was created by volcanic activity in that region of Africa. And as a result, that's why there are diamonds there all over the place. So this is a view from a UN helicopter while I was working there. And these are called alluvial diamond mines. So they're mines that produce diamonds just literally right on the surface, just from people panning in the water. Just the simple erosion from rainfall will make those diamonds present. And unfortunately, a lot of this diamond mining is done by children and was done by children. There's been a reduction in child labor in these mines now, but there certainly was a great deal at the time. Now, in the midst of all that, this like very, very broken nation, when I arrived in 2002, it was still a conflict zone, a post-conflict zone. But I met these amazing people there, and one of them was Esther. So this is Esther when I first met her a number of years ago now. And Esther is just like this incredible person, because in the midst of all of this conflict, she had taken like what limited resources were there and built a school. How it started was a series of community gardens to raise money just through growing vegetables and produce, and a number of women that she was working with who were teachers, but unfortunately were now unemployed because in the wake of the Civil War, most of the educational infrastructure was totally hammered. And so she said, like, you know, we're going to have this serious problem, because they were estimating that it might take like up to 10 years to rebuild all the schools in the country. And then you've got a whole decade of people that are are years behind, or a whole generation of people that are 10 years behind in their education. So she said, you know, we got to start building schools, and we got to do it now. So she brought these women together. They created these community garden projects, selling produce, and started a school called the Women in Action Development Vocational Training Center. Here's a picture of the school. This building was just a concrete block. It still had bullet holes in the side of it, like even when I was there. And they were in the process of taking this building and painting it up and repairing the windows and turning it into a school. She founded it in 1996. So when I met her, she was already running the school for almost a decade. And already now, there's already 1,000 women that have graduated from this school. And especially this was really important at the end of the Civil War, because there were people that had been displaced from their families, children that had been used as child soldiers, women, even young women who had been used as sex slaves. and they needed somewhere to go. And there was some stigma around, especially young people who had participated in the war. They were orphaned, and they sometimes didn't have anywhere to go. And so there was a number of projects that were together called the DDR, this is Disarmament, Demobilization, and Reintegration. And they were, Women in Action was one of those organizations that was a part of reintegrating young people back into society again. Just some of the women who've graduated from the program, they went on to actually start their own businesses as well. So a lot of them are entrepreneurs that have gone on to start their own catering, clothing businesses. Actually, back to this as well, I was going to say some of the women have actually been trained through one of the local colleges to become electrical engineers. And a lot of the wiring was actually done by women who had gone into the program with one of the local colleges, and they did the wiring on the building themselves. Just some of the photos from the classes. So here's some of the graduates, and they've been working to actually create a full life cycle of the students. So initially we're working with young women and girls, but they also started a daycare center, which helps a lot because you have children on one end, but also parents on the other side who also wouldn't have a chance to go to school because they were taking care of children, but they can bring them there. Here's Esther with some of the daycare students. And then you introduce adult education as well. We also have a woman named Samuela, who's Esther's daughter, who works very closely with Esther. And Samuela's project was to then also provide funding for women that had graduated from the school and give them a source of income through microloans to start their own businesses. So you also get like the graduation level. So alumni of the organization are still tied into all the work that's going on over there too. So right from like children to young adult to adults to graduates, alumni of the program, they've all been connected and tied into the project in some way. And then so I got back from overseas, and I was trying to think, like, I started thinking about international development like really differently, because one of the things to think about is that they really didn't need me to be there. Like I was sent over because I was this young student, and people figured that as a result of being from North America and certainly from being white, that I would have input to give. But really, like, these are community leaders that had way more experience and knowledge with their own communities than I did. So what they really needed was resources. And if I could tie the school to a larger community of resources, then that's what we would try to do. And so when I first got back to the University of Toronto, primarily it was just doing like one-off fundraisers just with the student community there. And, we were sending money abroad. But finally in 2012, after doing this for a number of years, we finally incorporated as a real nonprofit, Canadian nonprofit organization called Esthers Echo. And that name is intentional. The point is that it's Esther's voice. We're just trying to echo it further. It's ultimately her project. We don't tell her how to operate. We don't get involved in curriculum decisions. We're just there to give her resources because we know that she'll be able to use it as effectively or more effectively than anyone else, given her own experience. And to kind of give it an idea of the difference in pricing for the amount of money that it took to put me, one foreign aid worker, in Sierra Leone for a year, that amount of money could have graduated probably about 50 women from Esther's school. So when we started thinking about the value of just sending more people abroad, it made more sense to tie directly into community organizations that were doing this kind of work. We also brought Esther to Canada. So Esther flew to Vancouver in 2012, and she spoke to Capilano University's Global Stewardship Program. So this is actually her in Vancouver doing a talk with the school, which is awesome because then it's not me giving the presentation, it's actually Esther's voice. And she was actually able to train some of the students that were going through the Global Stewardship Program at Capilano University in entrepreneurship skills, because that's what she was. She's a social entrepreneur, and she used minimal resources to create all these projects and make them happen in an otherwise war-torn country. So super, super resourceful. Here's an image of some of the graduates. And like I said, we've got about 1,000 students that have graduated from the school since '96, 450 of them since we started partnering directly with Esther and the school. So what's that all have to do with space? I didn't know either. And to be honest, when I got home from overseas and started working with Esther, space wasn't really a part of my life anymore. In fact, I started seeing it almost more like a guilty pleasure. There are so many issues on this world and on our own planet that it seemed like taking the time to look through a telescope back out into the universe seemed almost beside the point. Almost like maybe escapism. And in a way, a childhood dream seemed almost childish. And so I couldn't reconcile the two things together anymore. And that was actually really sad for me because it was a big part of my life growing up, but it felt like it was something that was selfish for me to engage in still. And that was until a friend of mine sent me an article, and it totally blew my brain. It was about the atmosphere of the planet Jupiter. And the article went on to talk about how weather patterns in gas giants like Jupiter actually create carbon precipitated, literally diamonds. It rains diamonds on gas giants like Jupiter. It rains diamonds on gas giants. It's amazing. And I thought about that and I was like, well, wait a second. This thing that we treat as so precious on our own planet, this thing that tore apart Sierra Leone and caused so much pain to the people that I worked with, is ubiquitous in the universe. It's like literally all over the place. Not only do we have diamond rain on Jupiter, we have discovered planets that probably are completely made of diamond crust out in the universe based on their density that we're able to calculate. And we know that some stars, low mass stars like our own sun, when they die, they turn into white dwarf stars. The core of the star is left over. It's about the size of our sun, or size of our own planet Earth. And that is literally a giant ball of compressed carbon. It's essentially a giant diamond, like the size of our own planet. So diamonds in space are everywhere. They're all over the place. In comparison to something that we are trying to find out in the universe and haven't seen yet, but we're looking for, and that is life. And one of those places that we are looking for life is on one of Jupiter's moons called Europa. And Europa is really fascinating to us because it's one of those places in our own solar system that might have given rise to a second Genesis, another place where life was born. Europa is basically a floating ball of water. It's got probably a rocky core and an ice shell around the outside that could be, up to 10 to 40 kilometers thick. But underneath that is probably a liquid ocean up to 100 kilometers deep. And that ocean volume is probably twice as much as all of the water on our entire planet. If we were to stand on the surface of Europa, looking back on Jupiter, it might look something like this. And so if we can get down inside of that icy crust, we could actually discover whether or not life has been created somewhere else in our whole universe. And that's really good news for us. Mars, we're also looking for life as well. The thing with Mars, though, is that it's possible that if we do discover life on Mars, it might still be life from our own planet because Mars and Earth exchange material with one another. So we actually might be Martians or vice versa. Life on Mars might actually be Terrans or Earthlings. So it's not a definitive answer yet as to whether or not life could still exist elsewhere in the universe. But if we did find it on Europa, that would be a sure bet that it does because Europa and Earth never exchange material. So that means that there's like no influence from life on our own planet. Life has started somewhere else in space. We also think that underneath that ocean is probably hydrothermal vents, these vents that churn out hydrocarbon-rich material and heat and energy into that ocean. And we think that's one of the things that might have catalyzed the genesis of life on our own planet. So we've been able to sample some of the water from these watery worlds, these watery moons out around gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn. Saturn in particular, we actually flew a probe right through one of the moons of Saturn called Enceladus, and it has these giant ice geysers. So it's actually churning water out into space. And we were able to drink a wee bit of that water and learn that it is actually salty, just like water on our own planet, and has like the same materials needed to create life, just like we've had life arise on our own planet. And going back even farther than that, because that process takes a long time, the very materials that make up the moons and our planet Earth, well, they go all the way back to stars. And in fact, if you look at this periodic table, it's known as the astronomer's periodic table. These are all the elements that make up your body, and they came from dying stars. Stars are element factories, and inside of them, they churn up the materials like carbon that diamonds are made of. They also churn up the same carbon that you and I are made of. DNA helixes are based on carbon. Iron that makes up our blood, oxygen that we breathe in the atmosphere. And when all that stuff gets cooked up inside of a star, it finally blows up and gets spewed out into space and mixes into become planets and moons and life, just like on our own planet. Does that process remind you of anything? Specific temperatures and pressures and takes billions of years of time? It kind of sounds like a diamond. And so the point that I really am trying to make here is that my way of reconciling these two topics that were a part of my life was realizing that diamond, the true diamond or jewel of the universe, I would say, is life. But we have life on our own planet, and we don't always treat it very well. In fact, right now we're really starting to see, and it's coming to light, how we have been treating some people very poorly for a long time, and we need to fix that. And I think this perspective is one of the ways that we can do that, to remind ourselves, because I think life is in our face so much that we really take it for granted. And we need to start thinking about it more like astronomers do. If we were to really go back to, say, Europa and find even the tiniest morsel of life on that planet, like fungus or algae or like some single-celled organism, imagine how precious it would be to us. We would do everything we could to protect it and keep it safe and make sure that we weren't contaminating it in any way. And yet we've got life right here on our own world, and look what we're doing to our own planet and the people there. And that's not a thing to say even for intelligent life. This is Jill Tarter, and the woman standing beside me in this picture. Next to her is her husband, Jack Welsh, and then my friend Paul, who's doing a film with me. And Jill is actually one of the people looking for intelligent life in the universe. She's one of the founders of the SETI project. And this is one of the dishes here that's listening to see if we can hear life anywhere else in space. And that bright point above the dish there is actually Jupiter itself against the Milky Way, listening to see if we find anyone else out there in the universe, intelligent life, which also might be super rare. So when we look back at the Earth through astronomy, I think it definitely gives us a perspective to remember the value of life. And especially right now, is it important to say that all life matters? Yes. But the point of that is, unless all of us actually do matter, we can't say that we're treasuring all life. So we need to be comfortable with saying that, yes, Black Lives Matters, recognizing that people are being marginalized. As a science community, I think we need to be engaging with these topics and these issues for us to be able to say that, like, unless we're including everyone and we recognize how we're working to exclude some people, then we're actually kind of hypocritical. Because if we believe what we believe about what we're studying about the universe and the preciousness and value of life, then I don't think we're doing our own field of study justice. And this is looking back at our own world right here. This is the most distant picture of Earth ever taken. It's called the pale blue dot, and it was taken by the Voyager space probe. It's a good reminder to me that, and I use this word, the word here, astronomically literally, that I hope our similarities in a view like this become astronomically tiny, and or astronomically large, and our differences become astronomically tiny. One kind of a roundabout thing is that I realized that this photo is taken on February 14th. And when I heard that, I thought, wait a second, that date sounds familiar. And it's actually the same date that Esther opened the Women in Action Development Project in Sierra Leone. It's not the same year, but it's the same date. So for me, that day is really important. It's Pale Blue Dot Day, but it's also the day that Esther herself started her own school. So the project that we have is called Esthers Echo, and you can check it out if you're interested in this, or even just, look me up if you want to have this dialogue. I really love this talk between like human rights and space, because I think it's really important. Some other things that we could be doing right now, first of all, like we're talking about community resources are super important. Certainly, we would love donations. They all directly go to Esther and her project, but also take the time right now to be looking to see if there is Black Lives Matters work going on in your community. There is here in Vancouver, and they were looking for donations. Down in the United States right now, the ACLU is looking for donations, so that's something else to consider. I think PolitiFact is a good one right now, because there's a lot of racially charged fake news that's going out there, and PolitiFact is doing a good job at like making sure that that news is accurate, and as scientists, we should be doing that as well. Check out the Mela TV show. That's Samuela's YouTube channel. That's Esther's daughter is doing this work. And then within science itself, something we should be doing is making sure that we're promoting Black scientists and science communicators. There's a great hashtag on Twitter right now called Black in STEM. So you can check that one out. There's a lot of Black science communicators on there. At Black Women STEM is a Twitter feed or Twitter account that has Black women doing STEM education as well. Looking up other people of color doing science and science communication, kind of jumping off Marina's point there as well. Like Indigenous star lore is a good place to do that in Canada. There's a man named Wilfred Buck who's from the Cree community who's curating a lot of Indigenous star lore as well. And just listening and making sure that we're literally and figuratively making space for everyone. So on that note, before we're out of time, I'm actually going to yield the floor then to Esther herself, because I tried to get her to send us a message. So I'm going to play that now, and hopefully you can all hear it. So let's try that.
My name is Esther Kanu. I'm the National Coordinator and Founder for Women in Action Development Project Sierra Leone. This organization was formed in 1996 by a group of women that are encouraged to help the less privileged women, as we have a civil war that lasted almost a decade. So Women in Action was formed to help women that were not opportune to go to school, that were not opportune to complete their education. So in that, we were able to give them skills so they will be empowered. In turn, they will help their communities, their family, and the nation as a whole. And to God be the glory, we've graduated over 1,000 women. 70% of them are working, and some are into private businesses. We have also set up a daycare alongside the Skills Training Center. We set up the Kiddies Foundation, where women brought their children to the daycare center after their classes, after their skills training. They collect their children at the center. And also, we have set up another branch at the Pukloko. It's off the city, it's another town. We have over 200 women at the center. And to God be the glory, because there's no institution in that part of the country. And it's also a success story. We've also added computers. They are now doing electrical installation, auto mechanic, welding, and carpentry. Another success story, we had a group called the Girls Empowerment Initiative. This group was some of the girls that we are helping, the scholarships that we are given by them. Most of these women that we are giving the scholarship, the girls that we gave the scholarship, most of them are in colleges. Some have completed their college, they are working. And Samela was the president of that organization. And she's also my first daughter. She has set up the Women in Action Microfinance Company. She set up that organization to help the women that are graduating from the training center, to help them set up private businesses. And to God be the glory, it's a success story. Women have started receiving some of the microfinance loan, and they've started their private businesses. We want to thank God. It has not been an easy journey, but through the grace of God, we are going through it. And we want to say a big thank you also to Matthew and his team, the Esthers Echo. They've been our pillar after God. They've been supporting us, helping us with stipends, helping us with rent. We want to thank God. Women in Action has acquired 2 sets of properties, land. One, we want to set up a vocational institute where you will be able to stop paying rent. And secondly, we want to go further with the Kiddies Foundation. So we are setting up an orphanage at Bodilo. We have a 5-acre land. It's off the city, it's at Waterloo. Because there's no fund to put up the structure for the orphanage at Bodilo, for now we are doing a little bit of agriculture every year. It's a means to protect the land, and secondly, to help the project in some of its running costs. We want to thank God for the success stories for these women, Esthers Echo. We want to thank God because He has come with us thus far. Celebrate.
Esther gets cut off there at the end of the video. Oh, we lost picture a few times. I'm sorry. Okay, so we tried doing it live, but we're like, the internet connection over there isn't super great. But anyways, one of the things that Esther was trying to say at the end before the video got cut off is actually tomorrow is her birthday. So she wanted to say that as well. She's like, tomorrow's my birthday, so thanks for giving us a shout out and stuff. So anyway, so there's Esther from abroad, and I thought it was important to bring her in here. Anyways, I've gone over time, so apologize, but thank you everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and remember to keep looking up.
Hi everyone, my name is Sierra Kanu. I'm the daughter of Esther Kanu, the coordinator and founder of Women in Action Development Project in Sierra Leone. On behalf of Women in Action Development Project, Esthers Echo Foundation, I want to say thank you to Matthew and all those that have been supporting the vision of Women in Action and Esthers Echo Foundation by donating, by partnering with us. We just want to say we appreciate you, because through your donation, a lot of lives of women and children in Sierra Leone have been transformed, because those women now can make a living out of the skills they learned from Women in Action. Children now have the opportunity to go to school at an early age and benefit from the scholarship and all those things that Women in Action are giving to them. We have a kid that's almost in secondary school now, and we have almost like over 1,000 women graduated, and then they're all entrepreneurs now doing something they learned in the area of their skills. So I just want to say thank you. We appreciate everything that you guys have been doing for us. And I started Mella's TV show. As you can see, I'm putting on the t-shirt like a month ago, and I decided to do it because when I see what's going on here, I'm currently in the United States. I relocated like couple of years ago, and I found out that what's going on, the crime, the killing, it really involves young people. So I did a survey, and I had a discussion with few young people, teenagers that are in college and all this stuff, and I was able to know that one of the reasons is that most of those kids don't get the opportunity to talk to people they can rely on, and so they get involved into crime rates because of bad friends are telling them what they feel they're telling them is the right thing. So I started Mela TV show on that basis, and the influence and inspiration I got from my mom, because she inspires me a whole lot when it comes to that. So I did a talk show on the COVID-19, the pandemic that is going on around the world, which everyone is aware of. I try to outline stuff for young people out there, for families out there, to know that the COVID-19 is not only based to create fear, but it's a time for us young people and families to rediscover ourselves, to rebrand ourselves. We have the time that we never had before. So use that time wisely. See something that you wanted to do, that you always want to do, but there was no time. Now is the time for you to do it. I also told in that video, I told people it's a time for family to reunite. If families are not be having time for themselves, parents, because of the nature of your job, you don't have time for your kids. It's time to rediscover and know who your kids really are and what they're turning into. Just give them the attention during this time. And also I talked about low self-esteem. That was another video. You can check it out on my YouTube channel. It's Mela TV show. Yes. So I talked about low self-esteem, where I stated the definition of it, the causes of it, and the consequences of it, and how to overcome it. So that's like, instead of young people, because of low self-esteem, find solace in taking alcohol and taking drugs, it's time for them to rediscover themselves, get out of it, and be who they want to be. So Mela TV show is all about showcasing and inspiring young people out there. So basically, I showcase the talent of young people coming up around the world, most likely in Africa and Sierra Leone to be specific. So I try to bring out their talents. I'm currently doing a musical talent show going on Facebook Live every Saturday, where I have people donating, and then I use the money to give them to them as a prize for them to start up in their career. So I just want to say, this is also another branch from Women in Action Development Project and Esthers Echo Foundation. It's just a way of reaching to the young people, because that was the gap. Women in Action reach out to women and children, but as an adult, I can say, I'm no longer a teenager. As an adult, I have been through the teenage stage, and I see what teenagers are going through now. So it's just a way of contributing and reaching out to them, so they know who they really are, to rediscover themselves, and just know that whatever they want to be, they can be. They just need to be the best version of themselves and just focus. So basically, that's what Mela TV show is about. And I just want to say once more, thank you all, guys. I really appreciate you. And Matthew, thank you for giving us this opportunity. I really, really appreciate this opportunity given unto us. Thank you very much. You have a blessed day.